is Jill, aka Bean. My husband Frank used to call me Jilly Bean. That was my nickname for a long time. So, a really good friend of mine, uh, Virginia, if you're watching this, hi. She says one day, Frankenbeans. So, that's how YouTube got this name, Frankenbeans. I'm Bean. Okay, so this is my story. This is my testimony. Um, I wrote it all out because it's just how I work. I'm so nervous. Oh, goodness. Okay. Um, so, my testimony, I hope that it brings encouragement to anyone who is struggling. But most of all, I just want to praise the Father for bringing me through this, for making me new. Okay. Okay, here we go. Okay, I have 5 sisters and 3 brothers. One sister is my twin sister. We look nothing alike. We are completely different. I was born 5 minutes before she was. My parents are Mormon, and we lived in Washington State on an Indian reservation when I was about 6. We had a big farm with horses, cows, pigs, chickens, goats, you name it, we had it. And we had a big farmhouse. I absolutely loved living on a farm. We ended up moving to a really small, rundown 3-bedroom house, selling a lot of the animals, and I think it was because my dad lost his job. I don't really remember. And I don't really remember much interaction with my dad back then, except him coming out and yelling at us every once in a while, or spanking us when we needed it. My mom was always busy working on the house and on the farm, and cooking and cleaning. I used to ask my mom to wake me up so that I could go with her to feed the animals. And she would wake up at 4 a.m. every morning. She was a busy woman. And when she wouldn't wake me up, I started sleeping in front of her bedroom door, thinking that she would trip over me, and that would wake me up. My mom said that is what she loved about me, is that I was always wanting to help her. Anyways, in school, we didn't have much friends at all, being that we were white in an Indian reservation. And there was maybe 2 other white kids there. Well, we finally made friends. We wanted to go to their house one weekend, and my mom wanted to meet the parents first, of course. So we arranged, and my mom ended up being good friends with their mom. And so we were over there at their house one weekend. My sisters were in the bedroom with the other girls playing. There was four girls, and so three of us ended up being good friends with them. So my 2 sisters were in the bedroom playing with the girls, and I think I was in the kitchen helping with my mom because my mom was over there. And while we were in the kitchen, we heard yelling in the back room, and we heard the husband and the mom fighting, and we heard him slamming her against the wall. And so my mom and we went down the hall to the door, and my mom was knocking on the door, asking her if she was okay and if she could come out. And of course the husband flings the door open and points a gun right at her face. And he says, "Get out!" So she grabs me, and we ran out of there, leaving my sisters in the house. And we called the cops, and they went and arrested the husband. And he was put in jail for, I'm not sure, maybe 2 years. I don't remember. So soon after this, my mom left my dad, after 20 years of marriage, to live with my friend's mom. My mom and her were together, and my dad became obsessed with spying on her and taking pictures, and he would show me these pictures. He would show me pictures of them, sleeping naked with hickeys all over themselves. And he would say, "Look at this, look what she's doing." And of course I didn't want to see that. I'm a little kid, like, why would you show me that? anyways, I mean, I already knew because I mean, I'm there. We're back and forth at the house. So the the sisters were not good influences on us. They were in gangs and got my twin sister to join by beating her up and asked me if I wanted to join. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm all good on that. I started smoking cigarettes by the age of 10 and smoking some weed. Um, when the husband got out of jail, my mom and her girlfriend they left. They left all the kids with the fathers. My older brother and one older sister went to live with someone else, some Mormon friends. So they got out as quick as they could. um, my dad moved us to Silver Peak, Washington, which is, well, there's in between small towns in the woods along Highway 12. There's a place called Mossy Rock and Onalaska, and Silver Creek was in between them. I went to Onalaska grade school, about a 45-minute bus ride with picking up other kids, of course. The house we moved to was the house that we moved to had a garage with an upstairs where my dad decided to live, and he let us kids have the house. I think he was at a state of mind where he didn't know what to do with us kids or what to do anymore. My oldest sister, well, we pretty much took care of ourselves. So my older sister and my other sister, me and my twin sister, we ended up, so it was my older sister, me and my twin, and the three younger siblings. There was 7 of us, I think. So we met some girls at school, another set of twins that was my older sister's age, and another girl that was mine and my twin's age. So I was about 10 and a half, maybe 11 by now, and I started hanging out with these older kids. And we started going to parties, smoking, drinking, and we would have parties at our house. At first, my dad tried to stop us from smoking, but he soon gave in, and he started giving us cigarettes and partying with us and our friends. And then he started having friends and girls over in his garage. So one night I went up in his garage with my twin, and he had company, and he handed me a glass pipe, and he told me to inhale while he heated it up. I had no idea what it was, but I smoked it. And later we tried to go to bed because we had school the next day, but neither of us could sleep all night. I later found out from my friends that it was crystal meth. So at this age, around this age, I remember at one point going to a pond that was near our house. I just remember just feeling really sad and broken. And this is my first time I ever remember crying out to God. And I asked God, I said, can you just kill me? Like, can you take me to heaven? Because I don't want to be here. I don't want to live. Like, that's all I remember saying. I was just crying, saying, please take me home. One time I went up to my dad's room when he was gone looking for something. Oh, when he was gone, he was at work, I think. I was looking for something, probably cigarettes. I saw some blank VHS tapes, and I was like, I wonder what movies these are. And I popped one in, and all I saw was my dad standing naked there, and I shut it off immediately. I was like, oh, ew. I was totally grossed out. One night we were having a party at my house. My friends and I were hanging out with an older guy. I was 22 years old. And we were hanging out in his truck and his camper because he had a camper on the back of his truck. Well, the girls were leaving, and the guy asked me to stay. I shouldn't have done it, but he was all over me, kissing me and touching me and telling me it was okay and he was going to make it feel good. So I told him, I was like, I'm a virgin and I don't really want to do this. Well, anyways, I lost my virginity that night at about 11 and a half years old. It was awful. It hurt. And I went into the house afterwards, and my friends and my twin was like excited for me, asking me how it was, and my sister acted like she just couldn't wait to lose hers, and I said it hurt and I'm bleeding, and my friends were like, "Oh, that's normal. It's because you popped your cherry." Ah. Anyways, I also almost got molested by my grandpa, my dad's dad, uh, when he came to visit. He came into the bathroom when I was in there. I don't think there was a lock on the door, um, but I was half naked, getting ready to get in the shower, and he comes in and he just starts hugging me and kissing me, and God, I was so freaked out, and he stops, thank God, and he's like, "Well, I gotta pee," and I ran out of there as fast as I could, but I had nightmares. I had nightmares about my grandpa after that. Um, so my mom did come back to try to get us. She tried getting custody of us, so she did come back and get us. I don't remember, but I must have told her about the video that I found of my dad, because in court she had me go on the stand and try to testify against him. And of course, I denied everything that was asked because I didn't want to get my dad in trouble. I was still mad at my mom for leaving us. So me and my twin, we ran away from my mom's because she was trying to control everything we did. Of course, she's being a mother. But she found us. She took us to a treatment center, had us drug tested. She took the results to the court. So she had my twin and I court ordered to go to treatment. My sister went first because they wouldn't let us go together. It was a 28-day inpatient. My sister went for 28 days. She got out. I went in, and the court extended my stay because the court didn't want me going to my mom's house or my dad's house. So I was in one treatment center for 2 months. I got moved to a recovery house and stayed there for 3 months. I remember having my 12th birthday in the treatment center. So the court finally decided that the 3 oldest kids were old enough to choose where they wanted to live. They gave my dad custody of me, my twin, and my older sister, and gave my mom custody of the 3 younger kids. There was so much more that happened in between this whole custody battle, but I can't really piece it all together. But at one point, all of the kids were split up into different homes. But anyways, that's enough of my child years. I'll move on to my teen years. Oh boy. So I had one best friend that I hung out with all the time. We claimed to be atheists, but really deep down, I really felt different. I just had a gut feeling that he was real. Like I just knew it. So I was doing drugs and dressing gothic. My dad was still making me go to school, but yet he was partying with me and my friends. By the age of 13, I had been with 3 older men. The second guy was at another party at our house in the back of his car. And the third was in Mount Vernon when I was at the recovery house. We were able to leave the recovery house in groups of 2, and I met him at a restaurant. He worked there, and I skipped out on the person I left the recovery house with to go to the movies with this guy and then go to his house. By the way, I don't think any of these guys knew how old I was. I looked a lot older than I was. I really liked this guy from Mount Vernon. He was really nice. He wanted me to move in with him, but I knew that wasn't going to happen. Because once I got out of treatment, I had to go home to my dad's, which was hundreds of miles away. Anyways, I remember not wanting to go back to my dad's after treatment because I knew I was going to be using again. I put in for an extension to stay longer, and they denied it. I managed to stay clean for a few months with partying going on around me, but soon gave in. This is around the time that my dad started being weird and perverted. He would walk around the house in just his white brief underwear where you can clearly see his junk in the trunk. He would kind of give me hugs and rub himself on me. I found a hole drilled in my bedroom wall coming from his bedroom closet, so I covered it up with a poster. And one night my twin and I were in our room and we heard something poking paper, and we saw a pencil poking a hole in the poster. We both were freaked out and pissed off, and we went into my dad's room yelling at him, like, "What the F is wrong with you?" Like, yeah, a lot of cussing there. So we were like, "What is wrong with you?" So, sometime after this, I was around 14 or 15 now, and I was getting high with my dad. And he confessed to me that he spies on me when I'm in the shower or in the bathroom playing with myself or in my bedroom when I'm with guys. He told me he gets off on it and that I remind him of my mom because I look so much like her. Um, um, this was the only time that I ever seen my dad cry, and I remember just being in shock and feeling so violated and disgusted and thinking, why is he telling me this? I think I would rather not know. Um, but later I was glad that he did tell me because I was aware and I was very paranoid. Every time I was in the bathroom, I was checking for holes and making sure the windows were completely covered up and checking my bedroom walls for holes, checking everything for holes. I was very paranoid. Um, I found an intercom in my room, a listening device, once, and I remember being so angry that I smashed it and I went outside and I started screaming, cussing, and punching my dad's truck. uh, so this is around the time that I started dressing gothic. I dyed my hair black. I wore black lipstick, spiked collars, spiked bracelets, black clothes, black trench coat with chains hanging off my hoops. Kids in school were scared of me, and I would not approach me. They would not approach me, and that's what I wanted. My twin sister was totally opposite, and she started hanging with the preppy girls. She didn't get into drugs like I did. She was more into drinking. I started messing around with a Ouija board once, and I got really freaked out and threw it out, and I didn't touch it again. My friends told me that if I wrote the name of someone who died on the back, that I could get that person to talk to me. And instead, the board told me that I was talking to Satan, and it freaked me out. I threw it outside, and I didn't touch again. My friends all experienced really creepy things, and I just didn't want nothing to do with it. I made myself look evil and scary, but really, I was just masking my pain and suffering inside. Okay, so my twin and I just started ninth grade. And we went a total of 3 days of my ninth grade year because we just kept skipping school. So my dad took us into the principal's office and told him that he was taking us out of this school and going to enroll us into a different school. But he never did. He let us drop out. So here I was, 15, going on 16, living in a drug house, getting deeper and deeper into meth. There were people in and out of the house all the time, barely any food in the house. I would travel around with my dad to all the other drug houses. I ended up getting together with this older guy who was a drug dealer, and he was pretty much staying with me at my dad's house. I would go with him to other drug houses, and he wasn't a big user, but he was definitely dealing it, or at least he said he wasn't. I used to sneak some from him and hide it, of course. And he asked me to marry him one time, and I just said no. He said he loved me, but I just did not feel the same. Really, I just felt empty inside. One day I came back home to my dad's house with him, and we went to the kitchen, my boyfriend and I. We went to the kitchen because I was hungry. I haven't eaten in days, and I was a whole whopping 90 pounds. I cooked up the only eggs that were in the fridge, and as I was cooking them, my dad walks in and starts yelling at me because I didn't save any eggs. I was mad. I didn't even say anything, and I just took the pan off the stove and I threw it in the sink with the eggs. So my dad hits me across the face, and he grabbed my head, and I just started punching him in the ribs. So he grabbed me and he pulls me outside and he throws me against the garage a couple of times. And he went back inside. And my boyfriend came out and we got in his car and left. I had a couple of knots on my head and a patch of my hair missing after that. We went back later and gathered my stuff, and I went to go stay at a lady's house known as Harley Lady, for she sold Harley stuff. um, I got a leather jacket from her that I still have today. I wore that jacket all the time back then. All the time. I still have it. Anyways, this is when I met Frank, who is now my husband. I was sitting on the couch with my boyfriend, and Harley Lady was in there. And he walks in, him and his friend, and he asks if anybody had any weed to smoke, because I am tired of smoking dope. And I said, I do. Finally, somebody wants to smoke weed with me, because nobody ever wants to smoke weed when you're on meth, because, you know, weed's a downer, and it relaxes you, and meth is an upper. It gets you jacked up. So I met Frank one more time at Harley Lady's house when I was sleeping. I woke up and he was sitting there watching TV, and we talked a bit, and I remember him asking me if I wanted to go get high. I said, no, I just want to go to sleep. So I went back to sleep, and I woke up again, and he was gone. And I remember thinking, who is that guy? Like, I didn't know his name at the time. I thought to myself, he's really nice. There was just something about him that was different. And a few days later, I was riding around with my boyfriend at the time, and he told me that he was thinking we should break up because I never talked to him or opened up to him. And I just said, stop the car and let me out right now. So I did. So he stopped the car and I got out. I was like, okay, we're done here. So I walked for a while feeling so worthless and broken, not knowing what to do or where to go. I just remember looking up and seeing the moonlight through the clouds. And this is the second time I ever cried out to God. I only remember saying, God, I don't want this for my life. There's got to be something better than this. I don't know how to get away from it. And I didn't. I just remember asking him, just please help me get away from this. Sorry. I went back to my dad's house, even though I really didn't want to. All my stuff was dropped off by my ex. Maybe a few days later, Frank shows up at my dad's house to see if I was okay. I guess he had heard what happened and asked if I wanted to get out of there. I was like, yeah, I want to get out of here. Yes, take me away. So he brought me to his friend's house where he was staying off and on. And he played his guitar for me for a couple hours. And we just hung out all night. I ended up sleeping with him, of course. He asked me later how old I was, and I looked at him and said, you don't want to know. He says, no, really, how old are you? 16. And his eyes get big, and he's, oh. I said, I told you you didn't want to know. He still hung out with me. I didn't tell anybody that we were dating. I could tell that he was really nervous of getting in trouble, for he was 26 and I was 16. He was married before. That he's been divorced for 2 years when we met, or separated, I'm not really sure. I think he said he was divorced. Their son was 6 years old at the time when we met. So I really liked Frank, and my feelings grew for him more and more. The lifestyle I lived made it very hard to stay faithful to him because I was very easily taken advantage of, for I had no self-worth. Like one time, Frank and I were hanging out at his brother's place, and he and his ex-wife were arguing over the phone, and I asked, what was wrong? And he said, none of your business. So I thought, okay, clearly he's not ready to move on. So I hitchhiked back to a drug dealer's house. There's lots of people there, and I asked the owner of the house if he had anywhere I could go sleep. And he told me there was a camper in his yard where he had a bunch of cars. Well, some guy followed me out there and came in while I laid down to sleep and, well, helped himself. I didn't fight him, but I did say that I didn't want to. I was thinking, just get it over with so I can go to sleep. Maybe I was thinking, well, I didn't want to hurt Frank's feelings, but what can I do? Another time was when Frank's really good friend asked me if I wanted to go to somebody's house with him, probably to get drugs, and well, you know, he was all over me. And, and I even told him, I was like, dude, I don't want to do this. It's like I really like Frank, and I didn't want to hurt him. But that didn't stop him. I was even on my period, and that didn't stop him. Ugh. I just felt like I couldn't stand up for myself. I felt like a big pile of crap, to be honest. uh, I did tell him about the situation, both of them, but I was nervous to tell him about his friend. Anyways, Frank must have really liked me because he wasn't too upset about it. Not that I could tell, anyway. Then one day we were at someone's house that Frank introduced me to, and he tells me that he is going to move to Oregon. That he's going to go stay with his mom. And I was like, well, okay. What am I supposed to say to that? So this girl and her man tell me that I could go with them to Las Vegas. So I tell Frank, well, I guess I'm going to Vegas with these guys. So Frank leaves for Oregon, and I'm staying with these people that I barely know. I'm getting ready to go to Vegas. So Frank's been gone for, I think, a few weeks. Yeah, he was probably gone for about a few weeks. And literally the night before we were getting ready to leave for Vegas, I was sleeping on the couch and I hear someone knocking on the door. So I get up and I open the door, and standing there was Frank. And I was surprised, and he says to me, I can't let you go to Vegas. He's like, I love you, and I want you to come to Oregon with me. Yay! I was happy because I loved him too, and I really didn't want to go to Vegas. But I just didn't know what else to do at the time. So I left for Oregon that night with Frank. I was 17. We told his mom that I was 18 because there was no way that she would have let me live there. She knew I was younger. So his mom gave me a bedroom in the house, and Frank stayed in a trailer outside. She didn't want us sleeping together because we were not married. Wonderful woman she is. She really is. We still didn't stop using drugs, though. And a few months later, Frank had his son over visiting on the 4th of July. And Frank's brother was driving us around to see fireworks, and we get pulled over. The police officer asked for everybody's names, and he said he was running our name. As he was running our name, Frank had a fanny pack on that had paraphernalia in it, and he took it off and put it on the floorboard, and I picked it up and put it on me. He didn't ask me to do it, I just did it because I didn't want anybody else to get in trouble. For my record was clean, and I knew Frank already had felonies. So the cop comes back and he asks everybody to get out of the car. Okay, so I get out, and this fanny pack is like hanging clear down my leg. So of course the cop's like, what's in there? I said, there's some pipes and some baggies. Yeah, so Frank had felonies and a warrant out for his arrest, so they cuffed him, and his son was scared, and so I was hugging him and comforting him, and the officer asked, is this your son? I'm like, no, I'm just a friend. So they got sorry. So they got my info, and they got a hold of my mom and told me that they were going to charge me, and that I needed to go back to my mom's in Washington, and Frank went to jail. I think my mom came and picked me up. I'm not really sure. Now, I haven't seen my mom or my two younger brothers and my younger sister in a couple of years. So my mom says to me, you like older guys, huh? I said, yeah, they're more experienced, being a smart aleck. But my mom was cool about it. She didn't say anything after that. My mom has remarried to a man, and I didn't go to the wedding. Well, we pulled into the driveway, and I saw my little sister, and I didn't even recognize her. I asked her, who is that? My mom says, it's your sister. Wow. Like, she was grown up. She was beautiful. Like, she changed so much. Like, I was amazed at how fast she grew. So I went to work with my mom, doing volunteer work, building houses for Habitat for Humanity for a few months. And then I applied for a job at Western RV building motorhomes. I got to know my mom better, and I realized that I had my mom's work ethic. It just came natural, for she was a very hard worker. I started saving all of my money, except for the money that I would spend to go see Frank every other weekend, a 5 hour Greyhound bus ride. Well, so one weekend I was visiting Frank and we were watching TV or something. I don't remember what we were watching. And out of the blue, I asked him, "So when are you going to marry me?" And he looks at me and he smiles and he said, "How about June 22nd?" He just randomly picked a date, and that is how we got engaged. So I started learning about Jesus and watching teachings at Frank's mom's, and I was amazed at Frank's knowledge of the Bible. My mom would try to get me to go to her Mormon church, and I would refuse because I did not like that church. For I just felt judged, and I just felt wrong there. Did not like it. Um, I didn't I didn't agree with a lot of the things that they were doing at that church. Uh, for example, baptizing the dead. No, that just sounds wrong. She would have her missionaries come to the house and try to convince me with her videos, but all I said was, "No, you people have no power over people's spirits when they're dead." Like, that's all I could argue back then, for I didn't know much. And I haven't even given my life to Jesus yet. I told my mom, "There's a church down the road. I'm going to go check that church out. I don't want to go to your church." And she starts crying, saying, "I'm going to tear this family apart." And I just look at her and walk away. I was like, "Really? I'm tearing it apart, huh? Okay." Anyways. So I did. I walked to the church building. And it was like maybe a mile from my mom's house. And I walked in, and it was a really weird church, too. So I was like, I don't know. But I did. I sat through, I don't even know if it was like a real service. It was just weird. They had me go up and, kneel on the altar, and they would put a little wafer in my mouth. I think it was Presbyterian. I'm not sure. Sorry, I'm clearing my throat. Okay, so finally, I turned 18. So I had saved maybe about $2,000, and I moved back to Oregon to prepare for my wedding. So Frank's mom made a beautiful wedding dress that her daughter wore, and later her two daughter-in-laws got to wear. Me and her other son's wife. Also, she made a beautiful beaded headband for me to wear. I just wanted a small, simple wedding, so we decided to get married in his mom's front yard, for it was beautiful there. She had a flower garden. She lived out in the woods 40 miles from town. So June 22nd, 2002, we got married. Oops, darn. A pastor from a small church married us. He came out and married us. I think it was an Assembly of God church. So my mom and dad were both there. My dad got to give me away. So only 4 of my siblings could make it. I was the first of the siblings to get married. Let's see if I can fix this. Sorry. When I'm reading, I can't really see if my phone's falling. Anyways, I don't know if you can see that. It's the happiest day of my life. Well, back then it was the happiest day of my life. So I got a job a few months later at Fleetwood Travel Trailers. Frank still hasn't found a job, and honestly, I don't even know if he was looking for one. I was just happy to be clean. It felt good. Things were finally going to turn around for us, and I got baptized by the same pastor who married us. I don't think I got baptized at this point. So Frank and I helped him do a lot of work on his church. It was a very small church on an Indian reservation, and we attended often, but not all the time, for it was mostly elderly people. So I was able to get us our own place for the first time ever. My first house. Yay! Now I finally was able to pay for my own place. It felt good. So, well, about 6 months into my job, maybe 9 months, I'm married now, I went to get Frank from his friends after work. I went in and I asked where he was at, and someone said, "Oh, he's in the back room." So I went back there and opened the door, and Frank was sitting there smoking meth. My heart just dropped in my chest. I said, "Really? This is what you want for us, huh?" I was hurt, but I said, "Fine, give it here. Give me that pipe, so let's do this then." So I started using again. I found out Frank wasn't clean the whole time like I thought he was. He was even high on our wedding day. Yeah, that hurt. So, uh, that really did put a heavy stone in my heart for a while. So this is not what I wanted. So, I was able to keep my job for a few months till I ran out of drugs and couldn't wake up for work, and I got fired. So we stayed in our house for as long as we could till we got behind on rent and ran out of food and power, doing the drug cycle again, constantly looking for the next high. I became angry, and I would yell at Frank. I remember one time, excuse me, I remember one time picking up a lamp and throwing at him, and I missed him and hit the wall next to him, and it shattered and cut his leg. It's not funny, but I was really angry. So we decided to go back to Washington, to my dad's house of all places. My dad and sister and her boyfriend were sharing rent on a 3-bedroom house in Lacey, Washington. They let us stay in the extra bedroom. My dad was still using, of course, and my older sister and her boyfriend, which is now her husband, they worked all the time, so Frank left often doing his own thing, using drugs with his friends. And I would go with him sometimes, but my dad would get me high whenever he had it. So my dad bought me a cheap car to help us out, but my dad started being perverted again. I would be hanging out with him in his room, and he would start rubbing my feet and massaging them, and then he'd start putting my toes in his mouth and pretty much French kissing my toes. Totally freaked me out. I was frozen in fear. I think I pulled my feet away. I'm not really sure, but he just stopped, and I left the room. I still don't like my feet being touched. There was another time when I knocked on my dad's bedroom door, and he says, "Come in." So I opened the door, and he's watching porn, jacking off on his bed. Oh my God. So I quickly shut the door. I don't remember saying anything, but I was like, really? Why? I learned never to bother him if his door is shut. So my husband comes back after being gone for I don't know how long. We were in a room, and I just broke down, and I started crying. So full of sorrow. And I begged Frank. I said, please, let's leave and get clean. I can't do this. I don't want to live like this. And if I continue to live like this, I fear that I will kill myself, which I really didn't. Wasn't going to kill myself. I'm not suicidal, but I just really wanted to get a reaction out of him. I really wanted him to know how serious I was. That I did not like being there. He has no memory of this moment, but I can never forget it. Yes. I just begged and begged and begged. And he just looked at me, and I remember just seeing a blank stare, like he really wasn't hearing anything I said. And he gets up and he walks away and he leaves. Well, he took the car. I had no idea where he went, so a few days later, I asked my dad to take me to where I thought he was in the middle of the night so I could get my car back. Because I knew he'd leave the keys in the car. He still does to this day. So I took the car back, and maybe a few days later, or a week, I'm not even sure, he got a ride back to my dad's. And I met him at the door, and I told him to go away. I just yelling and cussing at him, and I threw my wedding ring at him, which he picked up, and he left. Found out later that he traded it for drugs. I was just so angry that he brought me back to this lifestyle, back to my dad's, knowing how my dad was with me. I know I told him. One point in time, I don't remember exactly when, but Frank was trying to wake me up because I was supposed to be watching my nieces, and he was saying mean things, and I just sat up and I punched him right in the face. And I got up to go after him again, and he just grabbed my arms and got me to the ground and just held me there until I calmed down. So Frank was doing whatever he was doing at his friends' houses, and I was wandering on my own. This one. Sorry. I don't have a proper stand, so I gotta really... Forgive me. Here we go. Yeah, stay. Okay. Goodness. Okay. So Frank was doing whatever he was doing at his friends' houses, and I was wandering on my own for a while, going from house to house looking for drugs. Because when you're coming down, that's really all you can think about is, how am I going to get high again? I was at someone's house, and there was this guy there that was talking to me and hitting on me and asked me to leave with him to his place, so I did. One thing led to another, and I cheated on my husband. When I was leaving, some girl come running to the car and opens my door and punches me in the face. I said, yeah, I didn't say this, but I was thinking I deserve that. I'm guessing you're his girlfriend. Yeah, so yeah, I was thinking I deserve that, and if she hits me again, I'm gonna hit her back. So I put my fists up, and she walked away. So Frank finally gets a hold of me sometime later and asked me to come pick him up. I guess he wanted to try and talk to me. I brought my brother along with me, and when I pulled up to where Frank was at, it was dark out, and Frank sees someone in my car, and he asked who it was, and I said, that's my boyfriend. And Frank says, oh, hey, man. Then I said, it's my brother. Gosh, get in. So we're driving back to my and Frank asked me if I had cheated on him. I looked at him with a straight face and I said, yes, I did. I knew it would hurt him, and I felt like crap for it, but I remember thinking, this is what you brought us back to. Like, this is the lifestyle you chose for us. I begged you to get me out of this. So, yeah. I'm mad at him, but I mean, that's not what I wanted to do. Darn this. Okay. Sorry, I gotta find my place. Ugh. All right. Yeah. So, I cheated on my husband. So, a few days later, Frank was cleaning out the car and found a letter that I had wrote to this guy. I barely remember writing this letter. Like, I was so out of it. I don't even remember what it said, but it was just saying something like, thanks for the great night, yada yada. Who knows what it said? I don't know what it said. But he was furious. He was furious, and he comes asking me why, and I just went into the bathroom and I locked the door, and I was just sobbing, and I said, just leave me. Just leave. Like, I'm not worth it. So he went to our room, and he started grabbing stuff, and he finds a listening device that my dad had hid in our room. And he was so furious that he busted the door frame and the door off the hinges to her bedroom, and he tells me, please come out. Like, I am sorry. We can work this out. He takes the intercom and he tapes it to my dad's door and like writes a big note for my sister to see that this man is disturbed. I don't remember what he wrote, but He wrote the note saying, "You're a sick man." And we grabbed our stuff and we left. And as I was driving on the freeway, Frank starts getting mad and he keeps asking me why I would do this. And I remember just slamming my hands on the steering wheel, just slamming them over and over. I almost wrecked. And I was screaming, "What? What do you want from me?" And Frank's like, "Whoa, just take the next exit, pull off so you don't kill us." So we get out of the car and we went and sat next to a creek and just cried. He put his head in my lap and we wept for a while. I don't even know how long we sat there and cried. So we went to stay at Frank's dad's house sometime later. I'm not even sure how long we've been there. The cops come in and they arrest Frank. And I heard he was going to be extradited back to Oregon to do some time there. So I called his mom from his dad's and I asked if I could come stay with her so that I could be there when he gets out. When she said no, I just dropped the phone and I started crying and I ran outside and his dad was following me going, "Are you okay?" And I just got in my car and left. I didn't even say anything to him. I'm not even sure where I went. I went somewhere, probably somewhere to get high. So my dad came to one place that I was staying at. I just remember it was under the hitch of a fifth wheel trailer and it was tarped all the way around it. So it was like a little cubby space. And all I remember was my dad asking me if I would ever come live with him again. And I looked at him and I said, "I will never live with you again. Never." I went to someone's house that I was literally couch surfing or staying in my car. So at this house, the guy was flirting with me, of course. I ended up cheating on Frank again. Honestly, I'm not a sex fiend at all. My past really affected me and my marriage for a long time. But I'm not going to get into all that. When Frank got out of jail, he got a hold of me and told me to drive to Oregon, that he talked to a friend and that we could stay there. So I decided to go back to Oregon. But during my time in Washington, I don't remember a lot of things. Drugs kind of fog your memory sometimes. But I do remember seeing a lot of people strung out on heroin. And it just really broke my heart. There was this one girl who was just coming down from heroin and she was just crying, weeping, begging me for something. "Do you have anything that I could sell? Do you have any money? I really need to get high." It's like, geez. And her arms were tore up, like her arms and legs so scarred. It was just so sad. Like, oh my God. I had like $20 on me and I gave it to her just so she would stop crying. Oh, jeez. I didn't even know how I had $20, but I had $20 on me. But when you get high on meth, you stay up for a long time. I think I would stay up at a week at the most. Stay up a week at the most. You barely eat anything, for the drug really makes you not want to eat anything. I spent a lot of time drawing and coloring and making jewelry out of broken jewelry that was either given to me or I stole it. I was just so lost in it, drugs, doing things and being someone that I didn't want to be. There were times I called my husband a worthless piece of crap and saying mean things to him, like, "How can you know the Bible and say you love Jesus and be living like this?" Like, I would just say stuff like that. Maybe I'll just hold this. My goodness. Sorry. Kind of hard when you don't really have a stand and you gotta read. Oh, jeez. I just had to write it all down though, because I can't get through it without it being having my story right here. Okay, so being on drugs sucks. It really does. Um, Darn this. Okay. So I drive back to Oregon. Rotate device. Okay. There. Is that better? Forgive me. Just a mess right now. Just bear with me. I know this is going to be a long video. Okay. Okay, so I was driving. It was about 350 miles to where I needed to go. I was driving and I hadn't had any sleep. I don't even know for how long. I got pulled over and I thought, oh boy, I'm going to get in trouble. Because I had drugs on me, of course. I had all my stuff in the car, so the cop was, he's like, all right, I see that you're moving somewhere. And I was like, I just need to get to Oregon. I'm trying to get to my husband. So I get back there, and Frank asked me if I cheated on him again. I tried lying because I was like, for sure he's gonna leave me. If I told him the truth, like he's probably just gonna give up on us. So I lied until he kept asking me because he already knew. So I admitted it. I told him the truth. I said, I'm sorry. I don't know why I did it. We cried. Frank decides to go to treatment. And he talks to his mom about us staying with her again and if he could stay there while he goes to treatment, or if I could stay there while he goes to treatment. So we used meth one last time together before he went to treatment. He went to inpatient for 3 months, and I stayed at his mom's and detoxed and got clean. I watched a lot of CBN with his mom, so that's how I was learning. I don't remember really digging into the Bible, but I was trying to read it. I went to a temp agency to find work. I got a job working at Krusty's, packing pancake mix and all kinds of other stuff. Frank got a job at Lippert's, welding travel trailer frames. I think this is around the time that I got baptized. Our pastor came out to his mom's house because I wanted to get baptized in the river next to her house, for it was so beautiful there. But the river was too cold, so we decided to do it in her hot tub. And I remember the pastor dunked me once, and then when I came up, he jokingly dunked me again, and everyone started laughing. I probably needed that double dunk. So I'm almost 21 years old, and we decided to try for a baby. A couple months later, I get pregnant. I remember being so happy that everyone at work was asking me why I was smiling all the time. And all I would say was because of Jesus. I remember praying for a son. I was so excited when I found out I was going to have a boy. So I got our own place again. We got our own place again. I got laid off from work, and I was preparing our home for our son. We went to NA immediately. I didn't really like going to those, but Frank had, he had to for his probation. And I got called back to work, but I said no, I wanted to stay at home and be a stay-at-home mom. The pregnancy was awesome. I enjoyed all of it. So October 7th, 2005, our son Gary was born. I had a C-section due to complications. I loved every minute of being a stay-at-home mom. Every minute. It was amazing. Still is. I'm a stay-at-home mom again. At 4 weeks old, my baby started throwing up all the time. Even 2 hours after he ate, he kept losing weight. I kept taking him to the doctor saying something's wrong. And she would say, oh, it's just reflux. I'd say, no, it's not. He's not digesting his food. So they finally said, okay, let's take him to the hospital. He's lost too much weight. We were in the hospital for almost 2 weeks, and they had 4 different IVs in different places. They kept blowing his veins. They kept taking test after test on him. They couldn't figure out what was wrong. So we got sent to the Children's Hospital in Portland, and they knew exactly what it was, and he had surgery the next day. So it was pyloric stenosis, if anybody is familiar with that. It is a muscle from the stomach that goes to the intestines. It was completely closed off, so he wasn't getting any food. I remember our pastor came to the hospital and he prayed over us. I just remember how much I appreciated that. It meant a lot to me. It was very hard going through that. I spent almost 3 weeks in the hospital with my son. So I went back to work part-time when Gary was about 1 year old, just to be able to help out with bills. I worked part-time as a waitress for about a year, and then I decided to apply for a full-time job building travel trailers again. I think because my husband switched jobs and was working graveyard at a mill. So my job there was this good-looking guy who was always hitting on me. It was flattering, and I would flirt back a little bit, but I told him I'm happily married, and I am not like that. So this guy was constantly flirting with me and saying that, oh, I could be your second husband, and just talking dirty all the time. So I gave him a ride home from work one time, and he tried to get me to come in, and I said no. So anyways, finally learning to stick up for myself, I said no. So somebody told my husband that this guy was somebody told, I'm not sure what they told him, but somebody had said that this guy was in my pants. So my husband believes it, and I tell him the truth. I said that I flirted with him, but no, there's no way that I slept with this guy. And of course he didn't believe me. There was trust issues for a while. He would go through my phone and get mad at text messages that I would get from my friends at work. There were jokes, but they were gross picture messages. They were dirty jokes. And I would tell my friends to stop because I was making my husband mad. But they still sent them. And then I would get mad at Frank saying, why is it such a big deal? Like I wasn't really seeking the Lord at the time. So after 4 years of being clean, Frank's off probation, we decided to try and smoke some weed because neither of us really had a problem with cannabis other than it was illegal. So we smoked together, and Frank says to me, are you thinking what I'm thinking? I said, yeah, why did I do that? Like, I am about to have a panic attack because how am I going to take care of my son? I'm so stoned. And Frank says, I was thinking, why didn't I do this sooner? Totally opposite. Uh, so I didn't smoke it very often, but Frank was smoking it often. And around this time, Frank's other son was living with us. He moved in with us when he was 12. His son started smoking weed at age 13, I think. And Frank finds out and says, if you're going to smoke weed, you're going to smoke it at home, and your friends can come here to our house. I was not happy about that at all, but I understand that he was just trying to keep him home and from doing other drugs. Now, at the mill where Frank was working, there was new owners who wanted to do hair follicle test on all the employees. Frank knew he was going to fail, so he tells me, I'm going to quit and I'm going to try my hand at being a stay-at-home dad. We had moved into a small house and weren't paying much rent, for the owner let the house foreclose on and said we could just live there as long as they let us. So I was working really hard at my job, working long hours. I got the utility position there. That was hard to get. I was the first woman to get that job. Of course, I was proud of that. But that job required me to be there a lot more than other people. I had to do jobs when other people were gone. I had to learn the jobs quickly and be fast at it. So it was stressful, and I would come home after a 12-hour shift of busting my butt, and my husband wasn't very good at making sure things were done around the house. And a lot of the time, dinner wasn't even cooked yet, and I would come home just really hungry and tired. He would have his friends over and his son's friends over, and they would be smoking weed and cigarettes in the house, even when I tell them over and over, no smoking in the house around my son. Like, he was 4 years old at the time. My husband and his friends gave me the nickname Drill Sergeant, or Jill Sergeant, because I would come home and I would start yelling at everybody, telling people to get the F out, like, get out of my house. Like, I was angry. Okay, just making sure it's still on live. Okay. Wow, almost an hour. Sorry, guys. So I was bitter and angry and stressed, and I tell my husband, "Okay, Frank, you're the head of the house, and I just quit my job because it's stressful. So it's up to you to decide what to do now. Like, what are we gonna do? I just quit." So he applies for a few jobs, and I applied for a few jobs, but no one was hiring. So Frank decides we should move back to Yakima, Washington, where my mom and most of my siblings lived. My mom owned several houses and apartment buildings. I had some money saved, so I called my mom to see if she had a place that we could rent. She just happened to have a 3 bedroom duplex available, so we moved to Yakima and we started looking for work. I found a job at a restaurant. Frank hasn't found work, but we both decided to try and get our GEDs because we thought that would help. So we start taking classes, and I'm still being angry at Frank because he's still doing the same stuff, and I just honestly didn't know how to be a good wife. Like when things were not going how I thought they should go. So maybe a few months after Gary turns 5, Frank and I are not getting along, and I was just being really mean. So he tells me that he and his son are leaving. And all I said was, when? At this point, I was fed up and I didn't care. So they left, and I thought, I mean, I really did care, but I really hardened my heart. So they left, and I thought that I'm going to make sure that he can't come back. So Gary and I will move in with my sister. I packed up everything, I put it all in storage, and I quit smoking cigarettes. I've been trying to get Frank to quit with me for a long time. And now that he was gone, I didn't have it around me all the time, and I was determined, and I quit cold turkey. Gary was getting ready to start school, and he had long hair because Frank wanted him to have long hair. It's never been cut, and I thought I didn't want him to be teased at school, so I had someone cut it, and she cut it way too short, shorter than I wanted. And Frank came to visit him while I was at work, and he was so mad. He was so mad at me that he tried taking Gary without telling me from my sister's house while I was at work. Well, my sister calls me. She tells Frank that I'm on my way. So he waited till I got there. And just, I decided to let Frank take him at the time for a couple weeks. So Frank's family was mad at me. My family was mad at him. And I was considering divorce. Divorce. I was really considering it. But as I was thinking about it, my heart just got heavy, and I was really sad thinking about what it would do to Gary. Like, I didn't want him to go through that. I really do love him. I love my husband. Like, I do. We've been married for 8 years at this time. One day at work, I asked my coworker if she knew a good church I could go to. Her eyes just lit up, and she says, "Yes, my church." My church is awesome. So I went the following Sunday, and there was a lot of people, really friendly and loving. And I went into the service, and there was a big stage with a band, and the music was great. Like, I was like, wow. People were lifting their hands, closing their eyes while they were singing, and I thought to myself, I like this. Like, I have never been to a church like this. This is pretty awesome. So the pastor gets on stage after worship, and he starts his sermon on marriage. I was like, wow. It was like he was speaking to me the whole time. So I said, "Okay, God, I will not divorce him." So I talked to Frank, and I said I wanted to work it out, and that we should get back together. I said, if you get a job and you get a house, we'll move back in with you. So so he says that he wants to be closer to his dad so that he can help him when he needs it. Now, this is the same area where we met and where we used drugs, in that area. So I said, "Well, if you think you're strong enough to be in that area and not use meth, then okay, if that's what you want." He said, "I'm strong enough. I mean, it's been 6 or 7 years since we used by now." So Frank got a motorhome from a friend in Oregon, and Frank and his son went to his dad's property in search of a job uh, and a home. So now our only communication was through Messenger and Facebook. Gary was going to school with his cousins, so I was living with my oldest sister, who had 5 kids and recently lost her husband to drugs. I helped her out trying to get her house in order, cleaning and cooking. She met another guy and moved in, and he moved in, and so my other sister said I could stay with her and her husband. They both worked full-time jobs as a doctor and a radiologist. They had 3 kids at the time. One new baby. I got to babysit him all the time. She has 5 kids now. So I would clean and organize their house, cook them dinner, and my sister loved having me there. At least I think she did. I loved being there with her, helping her. raise my nieces and nephews. It's awesome. So I would also work for my mom, cleaning and fixing up her houses and apartments in between tenants. And I got really involved in my church. I started serving 3 out of 4 services. Well, I started getting messages from Frank, and he was lashing out at me, just saying mean things. And I was just shocked. I was like, where's this coming from? I thought we were all past this. I thought we were getting along. Shortly after this, his son calls me out of the blue and says, Jill, I think my dad is using drugs. Like, he's not acting like himself, and he brought me back to Oregon and left me here at my friend's house. He left me here in Oregon at my friend's house and went back to Washington. So I messaged Frank. I asked him, how's it going, Frank? He answers, good. So I ask him, are you using again? There's a very long pause, and my heart just starts pounding. I knew it. And he says, yes. I just start crying. I just started bawling. My sister tries to get me to tell her what was wrong. And of course I didn't want to tell her, but I did. So I get back on Messenger and I beg him to come back to Yakima. I said, just come to Yakima. You can get clean. We can work this out. We can get our own place. So he agrees. And I talked to my mom about putting the motorhome there. She says no. So I talked to my mom's husband's brother, who lived really close to my mom, if I could pay him rent to let my husband park the motorhome and stay on his property. So he agreed. And he moved to his motorhome. So Gary and I would go visit him, and I got him to go to church with me. Well, one day he leaves. He called someone to come get him and take him back over the mountains by his dad's. But he left his motorhome, so I knew he'd be back. I just kept praying for him. And soon his mom calls me and says, Frank is asking me for money, and if I thought that she should help him. And so I told her what was going on. I have sent him money lots of times, because several times he's been asking me for money. Of course, I didn't know. And I remember her saying to me, one thing I didn't like about you, Jill, is that you never praised your husband. And I was really confused at this statement. I thought to myself, what does she mean by that? Praise him? Like, he's not my savior. Why would I praise him? Like, I just didn't understand what that word praise meant. I just didn't get it. So, not till later anyway. So my family is telling me to give up on him. And my sister says there's better men out there, that I could find someone better. And I said to her, I don't want anyone else. Like, that's my husband. That's my son's father. Like, if I can't make it work with him, then I can't make it work with anyone else. Like, she says to me, well, there must be something that you see in him that we all don't see, because you keep fighting for him. I says, well, there is. And I've always seen something great in him. So this is when I realized I needed to get away from my family talking negative. So I just prayed. I was like, Father, I need a friend. I need someone who can help me get through this, because I felt alone. I haven't reached out to anyone at church yet, but I knew I needed someone who can encourage me. So I moved into one of my mom's apartments, and I met a woman named from next door. I've seen her before, and I've always said hi when I was in and out cleaning apartments, so I started to get to know her, and I realized she loves us. She really loves God. Like, she would invite me over to read and pray with her, so of course I tell her everything that's going on. And she was just so good at looking at the positive. She had a way of interpreting the Bible and applying it to our lives in a way that I have never seen. We would pray and ask for understanding, and then open the Bible and just start reading it wherever it opened up to. And this is when God really started revealing things to me, and when I truly started seeking Him with my whole heart. Bit by bit, day by day, He was doing the work in me. My husband came back to his motorhome to try to get clean, and I thought he was clean for a little bit, but found out he had found someone in Yakima who he was getting it from. My brother was using also, and that's how he got hooked up. It was from my brother. My brother introduced him to other people. So around this time, my dad had put himself in a diabetic coma, for he was diabetic and wasn't taking care of himself and still using drugs. He was living in a camper. Someone came to check on him and found him in a coma. So he was in a coma for a week in the hospital, and the doctor said that he wouldn't come out of it. But he did. So my sister took him in her home to care for him until Well, until he became too difficult. And he developed dementia and he could barely walk. And he was refusing to do anything and was being mean to my sister and her husband. So three of us sisters went up and talked to him, asking him what he wanted. So to stay at my sister's or to go to a nursing home, because at the time no one else would take him in. So he agrees to a nursing home, and he was doing fine in there, but my sister just stopped paying for his bills and was using his money for her bills. Big no no. So my older sister took over his finances, and we agreed to get him into one of the apartments that my mom owned, where I was staying, so that I could help take care of him. So I got a studio apartment ready for him, and we moved him in. And I would check on him 2 to 3 times a day, checking his blood sugar, giving him his shots, making him food, cleaning his apartment, and trying to get him to shower. For he started losing control of his bowel movements and not getting to the bathroom in time. Then he would refuse to wear Depends, so I would bribe him with cigarettes to take a shower. For I was not letting him smoke at the time, for fear they would burn the place down. So that worked for a little while. He was capable of showering on his own. He had a shower chair, and my dad could walk, but he just couldn't feel his feet. I didn't see much of his dementia other than sometimes he was confused at where he was. He was very difficult when I had to clean him up, just getting him up out of bed so that he could change his clothes and then I could change his sheets. He would curse at me and refuse to get up for me, so I had to just let him lay in his own filth. My little brother and my older sister would come and help sometimes. So, anyways, I would bring Gary over to visit Frank at his motorhome, and we'd go in, and he says, "Don't look around. You won't like what you see." So, of course, the first thing I see is a meth pipe on the counter. I said, "Well, I don't want Gary in here, so let's go somewhere else." And I grabbed the meth pipe on my way out, and I dropped it on the ground and stomped on it, broke it as we were leaving. I never told Gary anything that was going on with his dad. He didn't understand why his dad was never around, and when Frank would come visit us, Gary was happy to see his dad, and when his dad would leave, he would stand in the driveway and he would watch him leave with the saddest look on his face. And I would go in my apartment and I would cry because it would break my heart. So this went on for a while, and Frank was back and forth from over the mountains in Yakima. I would go over to Rosie's often just sobbing because I would say mean things to Frank, like, "Why would you choose drugs over your family?" And I said to him once, "Frank, you remember you telling me that how the last book of Zechariah in the Bible was very disturbing for him because, talks about how pretty much like people are going to be turning into zombies. I mean, if you read that, it's the last chapter of Zechariah. So it was disturbing. So he was disturbed by that for a long time. And I said, "Well, Frank, look at yourself. You look like a zombie." And I thought, why am I saying this stuff to him? Like, is this not helping? Father, help me to control my tongue. So someone gave me a book called The Power of a Praying Wife. And that's when I started changing my prayers from "Father, help him" to "Father, change me. Help me to be a good wife." God started revealing things to me, like how to praise my husband and lift him up with my words and speak life and encouragement. I finally realized what his mom meant. When Frank came back around, I would get up my courage and I would grab his hands and I would start praying with him. I started rebuking the enemy and the strongholds he had on our life. I bought us new rings and presented them to Frank as a renewing of my vows to him and to my Savior. Every time Frank tried to get clean, he only lasted 3 days at most. He would go get high again. So Frank left to go over the mountains again. And I went to his motorhome and I found a bunch of porn and it had a bunch of paraphernalia in there. And of course, we started arguing over Messenger again. So I decided I needed to get rid of the motorhome. If Frank wants a home, he knows where I am. So I prayed, "Father, if this is wrong of me to do this, then stop it from happening. But I am getting rid of it. Like, it is, I don't want it here anymore. I'm paying for it to be where it's at, and he keeps leaving." So I called the tow company and I told them to come get it. And I don't want to know where it goes. It runs. It's a little trashed on the inside, but come and get it. Take it away. So my stepdad comes out and he tries to stop them. And he says to me, where's Frank going to live if we're taking away his home? I said, he has a home if he wants to come to it. If he wants to come back to it, he knows where I am. So my stepdad gets a hold of Frank and he tells him what I did. And Frank was absolutely furious. He comes back to Yakima, gets a ride back to Yakima. He comes to the apartments and starts yelling at me, asking me where it is. I have no right to do that. It's my stuff. And I said, I don't know where it is. I honestly don't. And I did that for a reason. Because I don't want it to come back. I said, I don't know where it is. And it's just stuff. Like, I don't care about stuff. I said, I care about you. You have a home right here anytime that you can come back to when you're ready. So that ended the argument, but he was still angry, and he decided to stay and try again. So day two, he was angry, being cantankerous, lighting up cigarettes in the apartment. And so I tried to grab him from him, but I just sat down. It's like, okay. I just sat down on the couch, and he comes over, and he grabs my hair, and he gets me to my feet, and I was just like, whoa. I could see the anger in his eyes, like, so he let go, and so I went and I got Gary, and I brought him to the neighbors. Like I said, I don't want Gary seeing this, because I think things are going to get ugly right now. So I just opened my neighbor's door, and I put Gary in, and I shut the door. And I'm sure she knew what was going on. So I came back, and we started yelling at each other, and I tried to get to my room, and he follows me, and he won't leave me alone. And so I lost my temper. And as soon as he turns around, well, I lost my temper, and I'm telling him to get out. I'm like screaming, get the F out now. Like, just get out. And when he turned around to leave, like, I was so angry. I started punching him in the back of the head. Jeez. So he goes outside, he's asking anybody to give him a phone so he can call the cops on me. Nobody gave him a phone. They just all stood there. And so he walks away and he leaves. And I just start crying. I couldn't believe I just did that. Why did I hit him? So my best friend Rosie just brings me to her house and she starts praying for me, telling me it's going to be okay. I love you so much, Rosie. Thank you for being there for me, Rosie. You were the answer to my prayer. I prayed for a friend and God sent me you. So, Frank steals my car and goes back over the mountains. And we argued a few more times over Messenger, but God really revealed to me that I needed to stop. I needed to just be silent, that my words were not helping him. So I decided to cut off all communication. I deleted Messenger, I deleted Facebook, for that was really the only way we talked. And I put it all in God's hands. I prayed to the Father, and I said, I will wait for as long as it takes. He would have to write me a certificate of divorce, because I will not divorce him. Help me to just be humble and commit myself to you, Father. Gary was 8 years old now. He was 8 years old, and I started to see him getting angry at things like his cousins. He actually hit his cousin once over a video game, and my sister was concerned about it. So one day I sat down at the table with him, and I asked him, what was bothering you? Like, why are you getting so angry with your cousin? And he says, I don't know. So I ask, is it because of your dad? He looks down at the table sadly, and he says, yes. So I decided it was time to talk to him about it. I said, Gary, your dad loves you, and he wants to be here with us, but he is sick right now. He is on drugs, and they are making him sick. But what he needs is for us to pray for him. For God hears our prayers, and I know that he will bring him back to us. I started crying, and he looked at me surprised, because I have never cried in front of my son like this.
And I told him, I'm so sorry that all this happened. And I said, maybe you can write him a letter. Tell him how you feel. So I got a card and I had Gary write on it. And I held on to it because I didn't know where to send it. So a few months later, Frank gets a hold of Rosie and tells her that he's just outside of Yakima and that he wants me to come meet him there. So she tells me, and I said, I can't go. I'm not going to go meet him. Well, you said to your husband to go meet him and talk to him and give him this card that his son wrote for him. So on Father's Day, 2013, Gary and I come home from church and I see my car that Frank took. And I was like, okay. I see him sitting outside my apartment. Rosie and her husband were talking to him, and I thought to myself, here we go again. Gary was so happy to see him. He runs over to him, gives him a big hug. Rosie sees the look on my face and says, Jill, come here into my apartment. So I went in, and she says, I see the look on your face, and we need to pray right now. So she prayed for me. And then she says to me, give him another chance. I said, I can't fight with him anymore. She says, just go talk to him. So I go outside. I say, hi. What are you doing here? He says, I'm ready to come home. I said, we want you to come home, but I can't do this again with you. Like, you have to get clean first. Like, this, I can't do this. You have to get clean. So I said, there's this program. There's a men's recovery house that's free. I have the number right here. It's a year program, though. And he says, you want me to stay in a recovery house for a year? I said, well, you spent 3 years away from us. What's another year to better yourself? You can still see us. So we hugged and we spent the night, and he called the guy the next day, and we met with him. And I took him to the men's home. A few days later, I got a call from the guy, and he says, Frank left. He walked out. Okay. Here we go again. So I left work right away to try and find him. So I knew where his drug dealer's house was, and I knew that it was on the way from the recovery house to my house. And when I didn't see Frank walking on the road, I figured he went there. So so I went to the drug dealer's house and I start pounding on his door. And I said, is Frank here? He says, no. I said, well, I'm his wife. Are you sure he's not here? I said, no, he's not here. I said, okay, well, if he comes here, you need to tell him I'm looking for him. He's like, okay, crazy shit, go away. So I drive home, and there he was. He was sitting in front of my door with his suitcase and his bag, soaking wet because it was pouring outside. And I was just relieved. I was so relieved to see him there. And I wasn't even mad. I got out of the car and I gave him a hug. And I said, I'm glad you came here. He says, I'm sorry. I really am. Like, I'm ready to get clean, but I can't handle it there. The pastor was rebuking me when I would try to speak. And they were just being very religious about praying, trying to make me pray for hours. So I just didn't feel right. I said, okay, I can understand. You can stay here. We'll try this again. So Frank detoxed, and he was different this time. I didn't see the anger. So right after this, our church started a Celebrate Recovery program. We both got involved. It was a Jesus-centered recovery program for all kinds of addictions. And Frank got really involved with his group of men, and I led a group of codependent women. This program really helped us both a lot. So prior to Frank coming back, I ran into my mom's ex-girlfriend's daughter that I haven't seen in a long time since I was a kid. But she was over at my mom's house with her 4 kids, and so I started talking to her, asking her how she was doing, and she tells me that she's really struggling right now. She's homeless with her kids, and I felt really bad for her, so I gave her my number, and I told her to call me. So she calls me out of the blue one day and says that I really need help with my kids. My boyfriend is being abusive, and I got high last night, so I went to where she was, and I picked her up and her kids and brought her to my house. And I think must have been on a Sunday, because I said, let's go to church. It's just right down the road. We can walk. So we walked. We got the kids to class. She sat through the whole service. And on the way home, Her son was running around being mean to his mom, almost running out in the road. And he wasn't listening to her or me, so I ran after him, chased him and grabbed him, and I put him over my shoulder, and he starts cussing at me, saying, "You effing B, I'm calling the effing cops." Look at her. I was like, wow, okay. Woo. He was just cussing and screaming. So we get back. I carried him all the way back home, and she asked me if I could watch them for a while so that she could take a break. I said, okay. I watched them for, I think, 2 days before she came back. So this went on for a while. She would call me and ask for help, and of course I couldn't say no. So this went on even after Frank came back for a couple of months. He's been back for a couple of months, so we would help her all the time with the kids. And one day she asked me to go with her to a social worker meeting. So I went, and she told them that I was her sister. So they were trying to figure out how to help her and the kids. I had no idea why she was involved with CPS, but they called me at work one day and asked me if I was willing to take her kids, like, because they were going to go to foster care and they needed a home. I said, let me talk to my husband. Also, you do know that I live in a 1-bedroom apartment, right? And they said, as long as they have a place to sleep. I was, wow, okay. Woo. Okay, so I did. I went home and I was like, Frank, are you willing to help out some kids? He says, of course. So they come and they look at the apartment and they bring the kids that night. I had a bunk bed and a couch in the living room. And so I had the 2 boys sleep on top, 2 girls sleep on bottom, and Gary on the couch, and me and Frank had our room. So I'm trying to make this a little bit shorter. So it turns out the mom gave up her kids. She was bipolar, very bipolar, and we were letting her see her kids more often than she was supposed to. She started getting mean with my husband. So I said, okay, no more. She started being crazy and just trying to come over whenever. And yeah, and her kids were just out of control. They're crazy kids, but we worked with them. We'd put them in the corner every time they'd start screaming or cussing at us. And they started getting better. We'd just give them a schedule. We gave them rules. We gave them a reward system, and they started getting a lot better. And we limited the visits with the mother. We decided to try and get her foster license, so we moved it into my mom's 3-bedroom rental duplex again. I was still taking care of my dad, so it made it a little bit harder for me to drive back and forth 2-3 times a day. And he was getting worse. So these kids were Indian, and so the mom, and so was the mom. And we met the dad, and we would let him come see the kids, and we figured out that the dad was not at all what the mom said he was. The kids loved him, and he had very much more control over these kids. So we tried to get it to where he could get his kids, because he was obviously the better choice. But since she was Indian and they're Indian, the tribal court said that all she had to do was get a house and she could get her kids back. So she did. She finally got a house after 7 months. We've had the kids for 7 months, and they went back to their mom. But they would still come and see us because they got attached to us. So my dad was getting worse. He was refusing any kind of care, but my husband would help him. My husband would help me get him in the shower. So my dad wasn't drinking much fluid, and I would give him juice, milk, water every day, but he just wasn't drinking it. And he started moaning all the time. So I said, I'm going to call the hospital. And he says, no. So I did anyway. I called the hospital the next day because he was just moaning. He wouldn't tell me what was wrong. So I come to find out that his kidney failed, and he was also falling all the time. So he cut his chin open. At one point, my sister comes and sewed him up. So I asked Frank if we could move him in with us, because we had an extra room now that the kids weren't there. He said, yes, of course. Of course. So, but moving him in meant we couldn't pursue the foster license any longer. So I knew my dad wasn't going to live very much longer. So I asked him, do you want to accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior? And he would just say no right now. So Frank and I went to our church and we asked the secretary to go ask the pastor if he would come pray for my dad. She comes back and says, well, with a church this size, he can't possibly make house calls for everybody. You have the spirit to pray for your dad. We will pray for you to have the words to pray for him. So I said, okay, I understand. So she prayed for us, and I went straight to my dad, and I said to him, Dad, I know you're suffering. I can see it, and I don't want to see you suffer. Like, I just want you to know that I forgive you, and that I want you to forgive yourself. And Jesus forgives, if only you would ask. Like, just, he's waiting. I want to see you in heaven when I get there. He didn't say anything, but I knew he heard me. My dad refused kidney dialysis, and we told him, you know what this means, right? And he said, yes. So things just got worse. He was still refusing to shower, and I could get him to, and I could get him to wear Depends sometimes, but he was crapping all over the floor on his way to the bathroom, and he would slip in it and fall in it in the middle of the night when I was sleeping, and Frank and I would have to force him to get undressed to get him in the bath, and he would just say, oh, you like that, don't you? I'm like, oh, yeah, no, I don't like having to do this, but I'm doing it. So he could barely walk. His mobility was getting worse and worse, and he stopped eating, and we finally got him on hospice and the morphine. And then they had gave me morphine and other drugs to give him to just help him relax, and he would refuse it. He was clearly suffering, but he would refuse any medicine or anything. So finally I got tired of hearing him moan all the time. He was constantly moaning in pain, and finally I put some in a small glass of water. I said, Dad, you thirsty? And he drank it. Drank a little bit of water, and that was it. I could finally see him relax. And then he went to sleep, So I would put a little bit in his mouth every so often just to keep him comfortable. He was like a skeleton. He was so skinny. He lasted a few more days. I watched him take his last breath, me and my sister. I didn't think I was going to cry because I knew it was coming. But as soon as I saw him take his last breath, I was just overwhelmed with sorrow. I'm sorry. So they came and got his body, and I kissed him on his forehead as they left. So we did try to get our foster license again, but we had to start all over, and they wanted Frank to pay for all of his paperwork to be sent. So we decided not to pursue it. Frank was working at a bag printing place, and I started to babysit both my sister's kids. 2 new babies and 2 toddlers, and I was also homeschooling Gary. I pulled him out of public school about the year before when we had the other kids with us. My oldest sister, with 5 kids, was struggling with drugs again, and her older kids didn't want to be there anymore. So one daughter called CPS on her, and me and my sister and my mom had to go to the CPS meeting and express our concerns about my sister and her kids. So the dad of the 2 older girls asked if he could come stay with us so that he could get his kids back. So we would let him move in with us. And he's a native, so of course they gave his teenage girls to him. Teenagers. What a time to try to get your kids back. They were all living with us. Long story short, they rebelled and wanted to go back to their mom. So he lived with us for a while, and he was going to church with us, and he got a job, so he started talking about Alaska, because he's an Alaskan native, and how he wanted to move to Alaska and learn about his tribe. So Celebrate Recovery was shut down in our church by the pastor. He said that there were just things going on that he wasn't agreeing with. It was too bad because it was really changing people's lives. The pastor started up a men's and women's group with videos made by him on the topic or a sermon. And there would be a list of questions that we would go through. And they were good. They were good groups. I really enjoyed them, but very controlled. Uh, but Frank started to get a bad taste in his mouth by some of the things in this church, and it started with the pastor not coming to pray for my dad. It kind of bothered me too, but I understood. I've been going to this church and serving faithfully for 5 years, and I was a teacher in the kids ministry and a lead in the youth ministry, and I was leading women's groups. So Rosie moves away, and I had a friend who was needing to sell her motorhome, so we decided to buy it. I'm not sure why. We didn't really need it. Just want to. Maybe it was because I needed to make up for getting rid of Frank's. But I met someone at church who had a passion for Jesus, and she had a passion for feeding and reaching the homeless, and she was asking people if anybody wanted help, and I was like, yeah, I do. So I kept trying to meet up with her, and I kept missing her. So she calls me up one day and asks if she can come talk to me. So she comes over to my house, and she talks about herself and her daughter and her situation with living with her boyfriend and staying pure and not having sex before marriage, and it was causing strife. She says, I don't know why I felt led to talk to you, and here I am pouring myself out to you. We became very good friends. Kiara, I love you. She has a fire for God, and she's all around a great person. It was awesome having her and her daughter around. So I let her live in the motorhome. She paid rent to live there. It was just great having her around. We, would help each other stay in the Word. We'd keep reading the Bible, and we'd even do little small Bible studies at the house. So one day Frank was watching the church channel, and there was a guy we have never heard before, and he says, Joe, come check this guy out. It was Michael Rood. He was talking about truths and traditions. He was talking about Christmas and Easter and the truth behind the traditions. And I have always wondered why we were always lied to as kids about Santa, and what is with this egg-laying rabbit? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, how did that have anything to do with Jesus? I've never told Gary the lie that Santa was real, and and where the presents didn't come from Santa and all that. I always told him it was not real. And it did cause a little strife when we were living with my sister, because they all told their kids that Santa was real. So anyway, so Frank says, okay, we are not celebrating these holidays anymore. And I said, with me. So we started looking into the Lord's feasts and how it says that my feasts are forever. And we said, why aren't we doing these feasts? And the Sabbath, why are we keeping it on Sunday? Like, when clearly it says in the Bible it's Saturday. So we really started digging in and watching Michael Rood and found his YouTube channel. So we were sold shortly after we started figuring all this out. We decided to move to Alaska, and we decided we just wanted to get away from all of it, all the noise from down south, and really get grounded in our new walk with Yeshua, Jesus. My good friend Kira wanted to go with us, and we said she could. I would have loved to have her with us, but she got in a car accident and things started happening to where she couldn't come. But she's happily married now. Love you, Kira. We packed up our motorhome and we sold everything else, and we threw a going away party and hit the road for Alaska. My family thought I was a little crazy because we really had no plan, but we trusted in the Father wholeheartedly. We knew that He would take care of us, and that He did. Frank had felonies from a long time ago, but they let him get in through the border. He just had to pay a one-time fee to get through. We almost lost a tire on the motorhome. We needed to replace the whole hub, and there was only one small town close to us, and the junkyard had one vehicle with one hub on it that we needed. Frank got a job the very next day that we pulled into Haines, Alaska. We found a house that was affordable and out of town where we could have our dogs and rabbits, for we brought them with us. We got into the house a week later, and we had to borrow some money to get in, but we got it. Frank's boss was really great about giving him the Sabbath and the feast off. He took a part-time job. I took a part-time job that a neighbor told me about, taking care of a 97-year-old lady, and the couple who hired me, it was his mom. They are really great people. It turns out that they were looking for a couple who are willing to do a work trade for rent. They need help around their place with gardening and
projects and stuff. And this is just unheard of down south. Like, you, they said you can live here rent free and just work for us. And I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. Wow. So, and they were even willing to accept my dogs, which I really appreciate that a lot. They're not really dog people, but I love my dogs, and I wasn't really willing to get rid of them for any place. I'm just so thankful that we made this move. It has been amazing, and I am really missing the fellowship that I had with Rosie and Sierra, and how we would sharpen each other and encourage each other. But since I've been doing Marco Polo groups with fellow believers, it has been awesome. It's been very, very helpful. God is so faithful, and I hope that my testimony helps you to just dig into His Word, for it is the living Word, and He does speak to us. He does. You seek Him with your whole heart. So Matthew 6:33, you seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. It's funny, I wrote this out and I didn't even know that my husband was going to put that verse on there too. It's so funny. My husband and I are going on 17 years of marriage, and I have never been more in love with my husband than I am now. I am so thankful for him and his leadership in my life. It was hard for me to submit and to let him lead, but with many prayers, I was able to let my walls down and not argue about his decisions, just give control, just give him counsel when he needed it. We haven't argued in a long time. So, my husband tells me a few days ago, Jill, since we're about to do our testimony, I have to confess that I have been with someone else. When he left the last time I hit him, now this was about 6 years ago. I mean, it hurt hearing it, but really, I wasn't surprised. I mean, I suspected it then, but I never asked. You know, I totally understand. I did the same thing when I was on drugs. But it's funny how my thoughts started wandering, and I had to literally take my thoughts captive and give them to the Father. But, you know, that night I cried and I prayed and I asked for forgiveness, and I just gave y'all thanks. God, thank you. Praise your name. Thank you for everything that you brought us through. If the thoughts do try to creep back in, I just say, nope, go away. So there it is. Now you all know my dirt. But all praise to God. Yahovah, Yahuwah, Yahweh, whatever you want to call him. He is the same. He is the one true God. He is the same then as he is now, as he always will be. He is the all-knowing, loving Creator. Feel free to share this testimony with whoever you think it may help. My life's an open book now. Shalom, brothers and sisters. Okay, I don't know how to turn this off.